Hey guys, welcome to the show. We just wanted to jump in on something real quick that we saw happening in the world at large. Very strange. I'm sure all of you out there are familiar with it by now. This kind of UFO, if you want to call it that.
UAP.
UAP, if you want to use that language.
There's been a lot going on.
Incidents following the Chinese balloon. I'm just going to do this with everything because we can't trust anybody.
That's kind of where it all started, right?
Yeah, that was the beginning. Before we get into it, I just wanted to say, sorry for the glasses. I have a eye issue. There's an infection. It looks disgusting.
Pink eye.
It makes him look evil.
Don't say pink eye. That sounds gross.
It's what it is.
It's just an infection.
That's what it is.
Hit that like and subscribe.
Yeah, so that's why I look weird. I'm not a fan of people with sunglasses on
Okay,
videos.
let's get to the video.
Okay.
They know what it is now. You're not a crazy person.
I'm not a crazy man.
Ray Charles.
What was the other thing we were going to mention? Oh, and also those of you familiar with the show know that we generally put out full-length episodes, but we're trying some new stuff, and one of the things that we're doing is occasional paranormal news updates.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Strange news. So we're testing the waters, dipping our toe in the soggy, strange murk of the paranormal waters of news. And that's what today is. So yeah, we have a crazy kind of thing that's going on. You guys have all seen it. What we're going to try to do is catch you up on the timeline of what's been happening with this Chinese balloon / UAP UFO phenomena. What's going on, and then give our theories, our kind of the backstories behind different possible explanations. I don't know what to think about it.
It's just weird.
Yeah.
You know, I think everyone's just like, it's just a lot.
Well, I think it's interesting at this time too, because we don't have really any information about these we have very minimal details about each other craft that was shot down.
Right.
We know, we'll get into this, but we know like they're not balloons.
Right.
According to,
they're not.
According to
Well,
the
it's weird it started with that balloon, and what's weird is it took so long for them to shoot that one down. I thought that was weird at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I think this is my opinion. I think on this so far with all the information, the minimal information we have, to me it seems kind of obvious, or it could be obvious, that they messed up, took too long to shoot that down. Under the ridicule, they started looking harder at radar, then started finding things that they didn't know were there.
Well, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here. So let's break down the timeline a little bit of what's been going on.
Yes.
And kind of explain, how we see it, or it's like you said, John, it is very just bizarre. The first stuff when we first started hearing about the news clips or the
takedowns,
after the balloon, like last night, when today is Monday, so Sunday night.
The fourth one?
The fourth, this is the fourth object was taken down last night. The third one that wasn't a balloon, at least we're pretty sure.
Right. And it's important. It's important to note, like when I was listening, or when I saw this totally randomly played it, like airspace shut down for DoD activity, and that's all it said. It didn't say like, oh, maybe UFO. There was nothing like that. But when you listen to the actual news report, there was this almost like read between the lines kind of thing where I was like, are we being invaded? Like, why are they describing it as
happening?
Propulsionless craft? We'll get into more of the detail that even points more towards that. But then it made me think, once it started being more obvious, like that, are they wanting us to think this? So it's a very complex situation. Who do we trust? Well, probably nobody, but what can we glean from the information that they're giving us?
Well, let's quickly get into the timeline.
Yes.
Let's catch everybody up on that in case you haven't been following it, like we've kind of been watching.
Sorry, my glasses are fogging.
Cool.
In here.
Yeah, you don't have to apologize for that.
Okay.
Apologize to your eyes.
Okay, so let's do this quick timeline here.
You start with the balloon. When did that begin? Because that was kind of whether or not that was connected. Some might say the balloon was...
seemed to kick the whole thing off.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that was February 4th. When that was finally taken down.
What's it been, like 10 days?
Since then?
9 days?
Yeah, 9 days since it was shot down.
Yeah. So they finally shot that down. Then they're, you could argue, really starting to pay attention to what's going on in the sky. So that's shot down over the Atlantic. Then February 10th. So 6 days later, we have that craft over Alaska that gets shot down. This is after the news cycle's kind of,
right,
really digging at the whole
and the assumption
balloon.
And the assumption, of course, is, oh, another Chinese balloon? Like, what's going on? Like, that's kind of what you're...
Even when that came out, I remember that's what I thought was so interesting when these first started. It started to become like a daily occurrence. Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens today. But it was interesting because I did notice that they weren't saying balloon.
Right.
With these other... Even that first one, I was like, okay, if it was a balloon, usually they would say balloon. So it's interesting they're calling it an unidentified object. Especially in the description of it.
It's interesting that it's the size of a small car.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's the... Which one is that?
It's the February 10th, second one.
Right, February 10th.
And that's the first, like, non-balloon. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was...
Yeah, over Alaska, right?
Yeah, shot down over Alaska. Sure, this was February 10th. UFO was shot down. This comes from the Times, by the way. They did it this morning, published this sort of timeline of events. On Friday, a U.S. fighter jet brought down an unidentified object over the waters of Alaska. The object broke into pieces after being shot down and was most likely not a balloon. A Defense Department official said. A White House official said the object was the size of a small car. The object was first detected on Thursday night, Alaskan time, and was headed toward the North Pole to visit Santa.
Inner Earth
It was struck down, Inner Earth. Yeah, so that was the first one we had that was not a balloon, right? Something that we saw. So this is what was interesting. They started describing these things. And so on the 11th, February 11th, the UFO was shot down over Canada. And I'm not saying they're the same things because obviously the descriptions are different. Okay, on the 11th, an American F-22 fighter downed another object on Saturday over the Yukon Territory, which borders Alaska. The object, which a Canadian official described as cylindrical and smaller than the spy balloon. So this one's a cylinder, right? Cigar shape, classic UFO description.
And if it's consistent with the previous one, we would make the assumption that it's cylindrical and about the size of a small car. It's starting to sound like the tic-tac, the Nimitz. And so we have an interesting clip coming up, actually, that I was triggered by when I randomly watched one of these videos last night that made me think, because no one had at that point had been talking about UFOs or anything like that. But it seems like they're pushing this, maybe not meaning to, maybe meaning to, that concept. So sorry, continue, Chris.
So which a Canadian official described as cylindrical and smaller than the spy balloon. By the way, that was like 3 buses, which was picked up on radar late Friday as it passed over Alaska. Then, February 12th, a UFO was shot down over Lake Huron, so right near us. An object that first appeared over Montana on Saturday reappeared on Sunday before being shot down over Lake Huron off Michigan. The object, which was flying at 20,000 feet, had an octagonal structure, interesting, with strings hanging off, but had no discernible payload, officials said. So definitely a different looking thing. The strings are interesting. If you're going in the ufology route, I immediately thought of angel hair, which we've talked about before, especially in connection to cigar shaped, which was the previous thing. I'm obviously connecting dots that might not be.
You're talking about almost going back to the idea of living sky creatures.
Yeah.
Right?
Not necessarily. You have, it could be a craft that some sort of aspect of their energy source or whatever is.
Yeah, strings is not a very,
descriptive.
That could mean anything.
Yeah, it could be cables. It could, and this is the other thing. They're all, these could be like private craft that people have built. These could be universities with research things that they put up. And it is interesting. You'd think someone would have come out by now. I know it hasn't been too long, but after yesterday, someone might have come out and said like, that was our crew here at University of Michigan or something. We're doing.
I think we could probably rule that out most likely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's either off world or some other government,
or inner Earth,
or
from the future. I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities. We want to
let's
really
keep it in the realm of.
Well, I think inner Earth is just as likely as outer space.
I would say in the future, probably not.
Future,
bit of a. I mean, that's Occam's razor. Let's go to
future people, like people from the future. Is there?
Well, that's what Jeremy said.
And on that, I was just throwing out ideas. Other dimensional. Okay,
it could be other.
But before we jump, I mean, and also we can just say it could just be man-made. Right?
Yeah.
We're only hearing what they're telling us. We don't know. There's no visible sign of propulsion. It doesn't mean that there isn't, a traditional technology. And one thought before you say that. Hey, John. Hi, John. We don't know. And an argument that's brought up a lot about as far as these being, are we supposed to think that they're UFOs? Is that kind of a distraction? It is odd the ease at which we shoot them down. You know what I mean? Like the tic-tac demonstrated a lot of maneuverability, unless they're sick. You know what I mean? Or unless they are ill, or there's a reason that they're allowing themselves to be shot. If it is ET, if it is
speaking as if they're living sky creatures at the moment, when you call them sick, is that why?
Yeah. Or you remember War of the Worlds, right?
Oh, you're saying that this is maybe less likely that they are UFO intelligence because they
potentially.
I see what you're saying.
It's a good argument. I mean, why are they just getting shot down like nothing?
Yeah,
especially from fighter jets,
right? And especially when you compare it to the Nimitz thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So. But speaking of the Nimitz, are we done with the timeline? Because there's a clip.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we are right now.
Will you play the clip I have plugged in for you, Chris? This comes from...
Are we being invaded?
I titled this, Are We Being Invaded? Because I first started seeing
It started to feel like that a little bit, like obviously.
One after another, things getting shot down.
Yeah, it is weird. I mean, it's definitely, it's just weird, the repetition in a row and the fact that we're all hearing about it.
It is interesting that, because I was reading about this today too, we haven't been looking that hard at our airspace.
Well, that's what I raised my hand about. I forgot. So I read on CNN, trusted, credible source that they are. I mean, when they first were talking about this, it was like they had mentioned that the government had really noticed an incredible uptick of UPA or whatever they call it.
UAP?
UAP in like the last year. And they were paying much more attention to it. So,
well, that was
like hundreds, like 500 or 600.
It was within the last year, 2021 to 2022 or something. There was like 500 reports by officials and Air Force pilots, things like that. It was like within the last 15 years there hadn't been that many. But the argument was made that they think one of the reasons could be, there's two options here. Is it an uptick in activity, or is it an uptick in, since they were encouraging people to share their
accounts?
No more
allowed to say stuff. Yeah.
No more penalizing or
no more don't ask, don't tell with UFOs.
Right, exactly. So it's hard to know. But I think it's interesting.
The egg.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because they're also saying like these are objects that they're picking up now that they used to see. When they would see once in a while, they would just go, that's probably chatter or clutter in the radar.
Right.
But now we're looking at harder after the Chinese incident. We're starting to look harder at what is in our sky. So we're seeing more of these things. Who knows?
I also think it's interesting that satellites don't pick them up. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Interesting fact. It's ground radar that's getting it. No satellites are helpful.
Huh.
I wonder if it's because they're too small.
Well, they're saying it's the curvature of the Earth.
So
you take that how you want.
Trigger for Jeremy.
Some old school conspiracy theory coming up. But no, I think that's fascinating. Chris, if you want to play this clip, this is that clip that says,
Carol?
Matching Nimitz object? Is this disinformation? So this is one of the questions I had. This is the first time that someone actually on the news that I saw had made this connection with the Nimitz object. But he's making this connection after speaking to a source, because this guy who's being interviewed as a commentator in the field, but he also has a military background and worked for the Department of Defense in the past. And in this, he's asked about, what he thinks. And he says, well, I talked to a guy who was actually involved in the shooting down of one of these things. And supposedly he described it as what they saw at the Nimitz. So play that up, Chris. That's pretty interesting.
Was I supposed to cue this up at the same time?
You can, yeah, if you want to, so you can hear it.
Okay. Ready?
Let's do it.
3, 2, 1.
With these balloons. So while the Pentagon on the classified side could have been tracking some of these balloons for years, certainly going back, let's talk about those UFOs that were seen off the USS Nimitz in the Pacific years ago. Remember, we had those fighter pilots saying they saw this unidentified craft, they're moving quickly. Some of the pilots I've heard that have, including some of the ones that have spoken to the pilots that shot down those craft over Canada and the one over Alaska yesterday, say these were not balloons. These were, craft objects, if you will. They're very similar to those that were spotted over the Pacific. So it's very concerning. There's certainly, something else the Pentagon's going to have to look for. But just talking, just in the Navy, I mean, when you're, standing watch and you have air search radar on, when you're looking at different objects in the air, they fly, profiles. You know what an airliner looks like. It flies 20, 30, 40,000 feet. It's squawking on IFF. It's kind of like when the radar hits it, it kind of returns and says, hey, here's who I am. Whether you're Delta Airlines flight, for example, 952 or whatever, that's going to be seen on radar. So in the case of these craft, when those U.S. military fighter jets are flying alongside these craft, obviously there's no one to hail. There's no one inside to talk to. And in terms of a radar section, when they're bouncing off and you're not getting a return because it's mysterious. Frankly, as somebody told me, it's not like The Hunt for Red October. I'm kind of dating myself here, Lawrence. I don't remember the movie, but when they heard that,
good movie.
There's no indication that they were manned, or probably not.
Right, and that's the thing. And this is what's really interesting is that if they're saying they're not balloons, but they also say there's no. I'll read a quote here that's I think.
Well, before you do, I just want to touch on that specifically. If he's telling the truth, and if there was a guy involved that he had spoken to who said it was similar, that's similar to the Nimitz object, which wasn't that moving at doing ridiculous maneuvers.
Yeah.
And so
it was, first of all, it was USO/UO. I mean, it was
went under the water,
emerged from the water, bubbling crude of an ocean.
Didn't it connect with some larger submerged object? Was that a different story?
I think this was larger. The Nimitz, the tic-tac was the larger thing underwater. It was bigger than a small car, I believe. But then it had these other things flying around, and those were the
tic-tacs.
No, the tic-tac was underwater. Big white tic-tac underwater. The things that were flying around we covered, they were the ones that were like the orb inside the cube, or the cube inside the orb, rather. Remember that? Okay. They were doing these incredible maneuvers. That's what they were initially chasing. That would drop from, I forget how high now, 30,000 feet down to like right above the ocean.
Stop
surface.
Right at the surface of the sea.
And then coming in and out of the water. But it's interesting because the second thing shot down sounds similar to the Nimitz as far as being cigar-shaped, white or silver. Sounds smaller, but still it's.
But are they just drones? Are they just weather balloons?
Well, hold on. I want to read that quote.
Or weather balloons. Oops, there's from the past. Just a weather balloon. Are they just Chinese?
Those are big drones, right?
Oh,
I guess
yeah. Well,
they're not like the kind of drones that you buy at.
Yeah, they're not like our
right.
Phantom. Whatever.
Okay, I don't have the quote here, but I'll just basically we'll have these in the notes. But one of the quotes I read was from I think the guy from the DoD when they made a statement, and he said no quote no visible signs of propulsion. So what's interesting to me is if they're saying it's not a balloon, and in the same breath they're saying no visible signs of propulsion. I mean, this is either brand new technology for Earthlings that maybe some other territory is using, maybe enemies,
or black projects, or
breakaway civilization, which is my favorite.
Inner
idea.
Earth. That's my default. Thank you.
Either way, it's exciting. For good or bad.
Are we going to get disclosure?
Right.
Probably not.
That's the question.
Yeah.
And why are they doing
my
it?
breath.
Yeah.
And again, I keep going back to what Jer said about.
What if there's another one that gets shot down? We'll have to do another report.
I just feel like it's gonna happen. I mean, it's because you have like 3 days in a row.
Well, speaking of which, this is interesting when you consider the idea.
Breaking. I'm getting a feed
from one of our on the grounds belief links. What really interesting thing was when we were listening to it that night, and we were starting to make this connection. There was a report that you found right after that 8 hours previously, China said that they had shot one down.
Oh, really?
Well, this is what was interesting when I was looking around online after the second one was reported.
That's when I was like, we're being invaded.
Well, yeah, because then
that could be propaganda, though.
From a communist dictatorship? What are you talking about?
I was looking around online and I came across this article where they were saying and it definitely could be propaganda because the only outlet that reported it has reported it initially. The only source is a state-run Chinese news outlet that's English speaking. But basically, they were saying that I have a little quote here. Oh, here we go. Chinese claims to be attempting to shoot down objects. This is just a quick thing I grabbed from this article. This comes from weatherboy.com. State media in China is reporting a mysterious unidentified flying object, or UFO, flying over eastern China's Shandong province and is warning people in the area to, quote, stay safe as officials prepare to shoot it down. According to the Global Times, an English media outlet run by China, local maritime authorities on Sunday said that they had spotted an unidentified flying object in the waters near the coastal city of Rizhao in the province and were preparing to shoot it down. Basically, yeah, and then they were warning fishermen, like, be aware, we're going to be shooting this thing down. Now, could this be propaganda to be like, because they have made claims since that Americans have been sending spy balloons over,
I'm sure we're all spying on each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But are they saying, they didn't say that it was a balloon. They're just saying an unidentified object. So again, is everybody just taking notice, or is this happening more and more? I mean, we'll find out probably in an hour after this clip drops, but
yeah,
it's interesting.
Another interesting thing was for some reason, Chuck Schumer, interesting fella, he was quoted as saying that they were, he confirmed that they were supposedly the size of a small car and that they had matched the shape and description of the Chinese spy balloon. And then the White House had to come out and correct him and say, well, he's right. They are the size of a small car, but they're nothing like the Chinese balloon.
They're not balloons.
So that's kind of interesting. That kind of like,
I think he said they're most likely balloons at this point or something, but that was not true.
He's in the know. Not.
Another interesting quote from The Independent was, on Sunday, the U.S. military said it had shot down a third unidentified object in as many days, this time over Lake Huron in Michigan, which we mentioned. Defense officials said they are still trying to establish the nature of the, quote, object, and, excuse me, sir.
Excuse me, plant.
And when they asked about unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, they said they were not ruling anything out. Quote, we're calling them objects, not balloons, for a reason, said General Glenn Van Herk, head of North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, and Northern Command, as he refused to rule out any explanation. Quote, I'll let the intel community and the counterintelligence community figure that out, he said. Also, I think it's interesting that how many days go by after we shoot the first one down that was after the Chinese balloon, allegedly, and we're still like looking for it. Or we're still waiting to hear like what it is or what it's made of. I know it was Alaska, and then it was, of course, the Yukon territory, which is hard to navigate. But if you shoot it down, I feel like you generally know it's over there, and it shouldn't take multiple days unless I think it's a stall. I mean, that's just that's what I would.
It's hard to know, but yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, there are remote areas, but you would think unless the jet is leaving from pretty far away, which is often the case probably, and then gets there, it doesn't have anywhere to land. So But you think it could drop like a GPS pin on at least where it shot the rocket? You know,
I'm sure they know where they shot it.
Yeah,
Sure they know
I'm
where
sure
they shot
they
it
have
down.
So then how long could it, how does it take multiple days for the U.S. government to send reconnaissance?
I don't believe, I mean, this could be national security. Like,
I'm sure.
Oh, they could just be, they could have
they're not going to
information just
tell
holding
the
on
public
to it.
everything about what's going on.
Especially if this guy,
if it's a UFO.
There's one.
There's aliens on the ground dead.
There's one fact that is always true. They
poor guys.
They tell us.
Oh,
That is sad. Let's have a moment. But they tell us what they want us to know. That's the only thing that they ever have and will ever tell us is what they want us to know. It may sometimes be partly true, maybe true, maybe completely false. But
we have to sort through the wreckage.
That's right.
Of information.
And here's just another quote from the same General Van Henrik in Politico today. I read
Van Herk.
Van Herk. U.S. Northern Command said he was certain that the initial episode, the downing of a Chinese surveillance balloon off the U.S. East Coast on February 4th, quote, was clearly a balloon. These objects, I'm not able to categorize how they stay aloft. So if they're not a balloon and they can't figure out how they stay aloft, again, just to go back to the
visible propulsion.
Just fascinating. Unless the details are getting represented incorrectly, there's some pretty magical stuff happening.
I wonder if
here.
Bob Lazar has an opinion.
I'm sure he
What's
does.
going on? You know, why is this happening? There is, of course, the different conspiracy theories out there about this, but one that it instantly brought me back to was Dr. Carol Rosin. Remember her, John? Blast from the Past?
Oh, yeah.
We have a clip from her, and this is...
Who did she work with? Was it the Nazi...
Werner von Braun.
Yes.
Yes, the Nazi paperclip scientist, pioneer of
Jake
rocketry.
Gyllenhaal.
Jake Gyllenhaal loved him in October Sky.
I remember that.
I remember that movie. I was like, I'm going to be a rocket.
I was going to do it.
Yeah, we almost did.
Yep, got
Real close. But let's play that clip because I think this is interesting. This goes back to the concept of allegedly what Werner von Braun warned Dr. Rosin
on his deathbed, right? Basically.
What's the video called?
Sorry, it's a small link in there. It's first. My headline was first, don't trust the news, and then it's the first link under that, like 5 lines down. So this is a short clip here from you guys remember the National Press Club with Dr. Stephen Greer? I think that's when she came out with this, if I'm not mistaken. But this is allegedly coming from Werner von Braun. She was a spokesperson for von Braun in the last years of his life, and he supposedly confided this to her. But let's just play it. This kind of gives a possible explanation of what they're trying to do with these moves, if you believe it.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosin. In 1974, I was introduced to the late Dr. Werner von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. He said, no, you have to understand. This is February, and we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system, the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
That was from the Disclosure Project, right? That big congressional hearing,
the press club hearing?
Press club, rather.
Yeah. They were trying to get in front of Congress. That was the thing. And Congress was like,
I'm sure it will come at some point when they've run out of all their cards.
Yeah. So she's basically saying disinformation. This is the plan for disinformation to weaponize space.
Right.
To get the American people on board to put missiles
It's probably
in space.
more than just weaponizing space, too.
Yeah.
Like that, a lie on that level, if they can pull it off, is going to be, they'll probably shove a bunch more stuff than just weaponizing space.
Well, that would change the world if they came out.
They're actually at war with...
I feel like if they mess that up, though, it's over.
Yeah. I mean, if you get called out and discovered that you're fabricating things about an extraterrestrial
If
intelligence.
enough people realize what's going on, I feel like that's kind of the last card they have.
Yeah. And some people are saying Project Bluebeam.
Yeah.
This is a great run through for Project. The only problem with that is if there is legit radar hits.
That's for those who don't know the holographic program that you can create live events in the sky to manipulate people into doing things that you want them to do, like the returning of Christ or
Alien invasion.
Exactly. Kanye concert.
I thought, when I first got into all that stuff, I thought it would have happened by now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't,
Maybe it has. Maybe it's just been really mild things.
Maybe we just shifted to the next.
No, there hasn't
ascension.
been any sort of like, history changing event that's really.
That's true.
I feel
Mandela effect.
They-
Sorry, I'm just throwing stuff in.
They really I do think if any of that stuff is legit and they do have these sort of plans, like there is an element that they have to get it right, but it's probably part of the reason they haven't done it yet, because it's such a big thing.
Yeah.
Trick the whole
Even
world.
if you get it, I mean, depending on like what you believe to be,
You can't
a
go
lie.
back from that.
but you think about like, they could get it wrong and then lie their way out of it. Like imagine if you, like, for example, if you happen to not subscribe that we made it to the moon in 1960.
I'm just saying, if they do something in the sky and everyone sees it and it's like, okay,
Like the moon blows up.
no, or well, whatever, or there's spacecraft in the sky.
Yeah.
and then like it short circuits and then,
Or it's just like, what happens next? They have to
Right.
keep the game
Oh, yeah,
going
yeah.
at that point.
Maybe that's why they
and
haven't done it yet.
That's
Maybe they
what
can
I've
do
just
it.
said.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not listening to you. Just kidding.
No, that's a good point. It's
That's
a,
okay. You're just getting me back for all the other times.
It's a hard, hard project to continue. And that's the argument. Even if you consider like the flat Earth stuff, the most difficult argument against the flat Earth is just
Way
how
to
difficult
just get
it
us
would
shadow
be.
banned.
The FOMF. Call it FE. Yeah, it's just the problem or things of that magnitude that you have to disguise would be so difficult. So
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing to overcome. When I was,
Can you wear those glasses during Jeremy's crazy corner?
I can. I'll put some tape right in the middle of them too.
And a tinfoil hat.
Oh, a CB radio.
I was just going to say, getting back to the subject for a second, for the UFO fans out there, you're obviously that second report is interesting because of the cigar shape, the tic-tac.
Mhm.
But going back further, like we've covered accounts of cigar-shaped objects. I mean, that's one of the most prevalent, I would say, shaped UFO reported.
Dad's superintendent saw one in
that's
Wayne
right.
County.
Yeah. I mean, you had that airship flap in the 1890s, that airship crash in Aurora, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
That was 1897, famous story. It's alleged, obviously, but there was another one in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in 1979, very similar description. This one was black but cigar-shaped. And then, of course, the one we covered on our aliens, what was it, UFOs on the Playground?
Oh, right.
Awesome episode based on Preston Dennett's work.
Mm-hmm.
But the that one story we covered, which I mentioned earlier today, which was the Jerome Elementary on October 22nd, 1954, where all those strings again, the angel hair that came down and they were picking it up and it was all
Yeah.
gooey and
I mean, there's no way to know at this point. It could still just be basic man-made technology. It could be a setup.
And just a weird series of events.
Yeah. But it seems like, who would be in the know in this? If these are, it's like you could even consider it possibly some sort of exercise, right? Some sort of military exercise that maybe only some people are in the know about. Like when they had like the 9/11 and there were jets in the sky.
oh right,
And they're
performing the exercise at the same
Dick Cheney
time.
was like stand down, and the exercises were going at the same time with NORAD, I think. I might be wrong about that, but that's the question. Like, could this be some sort of black op that is used to get us into a conflict of some kind? Or, you just don't know at this point, It's just interesting. There's just so much happening. I'm excited that there's something
It'll be
going on.
interesting to see if it keeps going.
Yeah. It's
I'd imagine they'd have to give us some. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on the administration right now to give some answers to the American people of what was shot down. So I imagine we'll get something. Whether it'll be the truth, obviously, it's a big question mark. But we'll get some information on.
We haven't got-
There'll
They're
be
going to have
nodes
to.
of truth.
There'll be nodes of truth, and they're going to have to explain the comments of no discernible propulsion and not a balloon.
yeah.
I don't
they're gonna
know
have to
if
explain
they
that.
will.
Yeah. Well, they're going to have to. They're going to have to make up a lie.
That would
They're
be
gonna
if
have to-
you were in the audience asking the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure some people are going to.
Yeah.
report
No,
on that.
maybe. But
So
I
if they don't give it, I mean,
I don't have a ton of confidence in like the press briefings, like asking really good
right,
questions.
right.
Do you have any confidence?
No.
Well, even the like,
But who knows?
even the guy on the head of the board. I'm going to get all this wrong, but I watched today. He was a Democrat, maybe senator, but he's on the board of the National Defense or something, and he was on, I think, MSNBC today saying that the administration needs to give more transparency because, you know, he was leaning, I mean, his language made it sound like he was leaning more towards potential UFO, potential not Earth related, or at least advanced technology. And that the Biden administration needs to be more transparent. And this is someone in his own party. So I'm hoping that and this is MSNBC, and they're reporting it. So I'm hoping that
is that what we're supposed to think, though?
You never know.
They're probably all too just like, thank God there's something else to talk about besides our boring.
Until Trump gets back in the race. Yeah. Fascinating stuff, guys. Ongoing situation. We just wanted to jump in, kind of hear what you guys think about this, kind of give some information and try to do a bit of a timeline with some context based on how we see it. But we'd love to know what you guys think.
Yeah, definitely let us, like, what are your theories? What do you, what does everyone else think about this? It's definitely one of those, I'm sure there's probably a lot of theories that could be floating around right now.
Oh, speaking of floating around, I'm going to say sky creature. That's why I wore this shirt.
Oh, is that why you wear that shirt?
That's why I wear a jellyfish shirt.
I love that shirt.
Yeah, it's
so fun.
Could be.
Fun shirt.
Not a lot of occasions I get to wear it. So,
do you think when they shot it down, just exploded into a gelatinous mass?
That's why they can't find it.
That's why they can't find it.
Just disintegrated.
It just went, poor guy.
Poor sky whale. Someone did refer to it, one of them, as entities.
And Jordan Peele was like, no.
My sky whale.
My sky whale. My beautiful sky whale.
I mean,
the
only thing that made me wonder about that was, I mean, the octagonal one with the strings. Like, I mean, octagonal is semi sky whale-y. And then the strings, like the star jelly that you hear about.
You know those octagonal whales swimming around?
Those hard edge octagon shapes.
But I see what you mean. They could be jellyfish. The box jellyfish. I don't know. Are they shaped like boxes? There might be some kind of like geometric jellyfish
I guess
like
that's
boxes
possible.
with the strings. I think we've proved it. Sky whales. Sky creatures.
Yes, we'll keep you informed. Maybe.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us, guys. If you enjoyed this, well, like and subscribe regardless if you enjoyed it. But if you enjoyed it, let us know. We'd like to do more sort of on the spot news updates, anything strange going on in our world.
And regularly, hopefully, for Dogman Whisper level members. That'll be a great thing to do, I think, going down the road. Some kind of regular video.
We're working out the bugs right now.
Yeah.
It's a little tough with the studio setup, but we're planning on getting a new spot at some point.
Yeah,
so.
still recording in the living room, so we appreciate all the support that you guys have sent our way, because this gets tough when we have guests over.
Thanks for checking us out.
Thanks for being here. All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Stay safe.
We are Valid News.
Watch out for balloons.
We are Valid News.